This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free slides that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
There are some fairly well-defined types of IT system, and generally these describe the historical development of IT systems. The earliest type of system was known as a transaction processing system. Essentially this was developed in the 1960s, and it does what it says. It processes transactions, sales, wages, salaries. It was essentially just automation of what had been done by armies of accountants. There was nothing terribly clever about it, but it took a lot of repetitive calculation out of organizations, speeded up processing, and probably added to accuracy. It certainly saved costs. Very soon after transaction processing was well established, people began to think that if, for example, we have the receivables ledger in a computerized system, we can use the data which is there to create useful management information. For example, an aged receivables analysis. Management information came into its own in the 1970s. It was producing information which was going to be useful for management for making decisions. By and large, the information was for decisions which were fairly black and white, right or wrong. Either someone is above their credit limit or they're not. Therefore we either authorize their order or we refuse it. In the 1980s, decision support systems became more common. Again, this does what it says. It helps people, it supports people make decisions. The IT system doesn't make the decisions. A very good example of a decision support system is how do you decide what next year's budget should be. Here there's no right or wrong way of deciding what next year's sales should be. It's a process which depends on judgment and experience. However, something like a spreadsheet where you set up a budget is going to be extremely useful in helping you to come to a conclusion about what next year's budget should be. You can change the input assumptions, and very quickly the results are calculated. The spreadsheet isn't drafting next year's budget, but is giving you great help in arriving at next year's budget. It is supporting your decision making. Finally, and I suppose in the 1990s, we had executive information systems. There is perhaps not a huge difference between decision support systems and executive information systems, but the characteristics you tend to find in the latter are the following. First of all, it provides very flexible access to information. Secondly, executives often need information from outside the organization, so an executive information system almost certainly has links to external databases or at least to the internet. Third, it allows executives to drill down. The executive might see initially total receivables, but if that figure is clicked on, then it will divide into the receivables from each of the major divisions. If one of those is clicked on, it will then begin to show the receivables from each of the major customers and so on. You're drilling down into successive levels of detail and more information as required. And the final characteristic, which is often talked about with executive information systems, is that they are highly graphical. Executives need to see trends, because they will often be using trends to project the future and decide on how the organization should move forward. It's very often easier to see a trend, to see growth or decline, by looking at a graph, rather than looking at tables of figures. IT systems can also be categorized by their hardware. Standalone systems are single computers not connected to any other computers. LANs, or local area networks, is a number of computers connected to other computers. Local area network means that the group of computers are in a relatively confined area, perhaps within a hospital, a school, a university, or a single office block. Local area networks use special cabling to allow the different computers to communicate with each other. The immediate benefit is that information can be shared between all users on the network. It also facilitates the transmission of emails. Usually one of the computers on the network is what's known as a file server. This is a computer with a large capacity disk where much information is held centrally and then accessed by the various users of other computers. Wide area networks is somewhat similar to local area networks, except that its geographical spread is much greater, typically over a number of different cities or perhaps over a number of different countries. This means that special cabling can't be used for all communications, and use has to be made of commercial telecommunication networks, such as the ordinary phone system. Typically, you might have a local area network, a LAN in London, another LAN in New York, and these are connected over the satellite system to produce a WAN, so that the London and New York offices can be connected and share information. The Internet is a network of networks. The Internet comprises websites, each with a unique address, usually beginning www, and when this is typed in, you are switched through the network, potentially using many different pathways, to access a computer which holds information for that website. Navigation through the Internet is by use of something like Internet Explorer or Firefox. An intranet is an internal Internet. In many ways it's very similar to a LAN. The main difference is the human interface, which again is through something like Internet Explorer or Firefox. Intranets are extremely good ways of sharing information throughout an organization, and often newsletters, personnel handbooks, product handbooks, and custom information is shared in this way. An extranet is an intranet, but which can also communicate with the intranet of another organization. A good example would be an intranet belonging to a supermarket having access to the intranet belonging to a supplier. When goods in the supermarket fall below the reorder level, an electronic order is sent over the extranet to the supplier's system, and the order is then dispatched.